Hello travelers, Boardman21 here, and today got another endgame build for you, and this one is going to be the Shadow Daggers Bladedancer. Now this is heavily influenced by the way that McFluffin has his setup, so I will link his below. However, when we created this character, we did do a few things differently, especially inside of like Smokebomb. I have it producing shadows, where in his guide he doesn't. We're going dual dagger instead of dagger and sword. Some passive points are different, so there are quite a few changes. But essentially the build is the same. You're going to be shifting all the time. Your shifting is going to proc a shadow. The shadow will use Shadow Cascade. Every time that a shadow disappears, it will drop Umbral Blades. The Umbral Blades will then spin in a circle, applying Shadow Daggers on hit, and after they do 4 stacks, they plunge, which is guaranteed critical strike on the enemy for big damage, as you get added throwing and added physical or added melee damage to it. So there's a lot of flat base damage at 450% effectiveness, and it just allows you to stack the damage on that absolutely crazy. And when you have multiple Umbral Blades spinning around and hitting the same target, it applies the stacks very fast, allowing you to do great damage to single target. We also have Smokebomb, and when you have Smokebomb active, it makes a shadow every second, and then when you shift, those shadows will then use Shadow Cascade and drop a Umbral's Blade, allowing you to get more Shadow Daggers. And then inside of Shadow Cascade, we also have the daggers that shoot out, and each one of those can apply Shadow Daggers on hit as well. It's only a 20% chance from our shadows, but we ourselves have a 100% chance, and we have so many shadows that it really doesn't matter too much. Now, you can do all the content in the game. In the footage you were watching, we were doing 500 Corruption, now we're doing Tier 4 𝐁𝐿𝐴. And while you're not the tankiest build in the game, and really not tanky at all, you have a high percentage of dodge and you're moving very fast. Now you can take hits, you just can't be one-shot with the one-shot mechanics, so if you do get hit by those and don't dodge them, you're going to be in trouble. You do get a lot of sources of reduced damage while moving, and that is also going to reduce the damage from dots, which is really nice. We build into that. We get reduced damage at low life. You have endurance. You're going to build into critical strike points. So you do have the normal layers of defense, and you're decently tanky, but overall you're just going to have a high chance of dodge. You want to stay on the move and just not take any hits. With all of that in mind, let's go ahead and get into the skills and passives and exactly how this works. For skills, I'm running Umbral Blades, Shift, Shadow Cascade, Synchronized Strike, and Smokebomb. For Umbral Blades, we have this so that our shadows will drop it and that it will spin in a circle applying Shadow Daggers. So we've got 4 points in downfall so that you have a chance to gain Dust Shroud when you use Umbral Blades and hit at least one enemy. So if you do manually cast it, which I don't really do, but if you do, you have a chance for some extra Dust Shrouds. 1 point in Edge of Obscurity, and then 1 point in Umbral Remnant, so shadows will drop Umbral Blades at the end of their cycle, or when you have them use one of your skills. For instance, we shift, we then use Shadow Cascade, all of our shadows use Shadow Cascade, so once they've used it, they then drop an Umbral Blade behind. We then have 1 point in Sword Thrower, with 1 point in Lethal Darkness, so that the Umbral Blades will inflict Shadow Dagger with hits. And then we have Cacophony of Steel, which the blades then spin in place. 4 points in Steel Torrent so that they have increased area and duration, and then 1 point in Loathing so that they can home in on enemies, which is really nice for single target. So when you use Synchronized Strike, or if you have Smokebomb and your shadows are kind of outside the area of the boss, once those blade storms are made, they will then home in and hit your single target really nicely and stack up on each other. And then we have 3 points in Jagged Carvings, 1 point in Sub-Zero Intrusion, converting it to cold just for some chill chance with the 2 points in Cold Snap Strike. The Umbral Blades themselves don't do any damage, it's the Shadow Daggers, so we don't care about converting it to cold, which we're not scaling damage for. It's just for that chill chance to slow enemies down with their move speed and attack speed. For Shift, we have this set up to apply Shadow Daggers on hit in its melee range, to be invincible while shifting, to proc a shadow, and to make our shadows use Shadow Cascade. So a lot going on in the few points that we have here. We have 1 point in Unseen Strike, so you do melee damage along the path of shifting, 3 points in Broad Sweep, so that you have a wider width that you're hitting, so you can hit more enemies along the way, and 2 points in Hidden Blade, so all the hits you do with Shift as you shift through enemies is going to have a 100% chance to apply a Shadow Dagger on hit. Then we've got 3 points in Velocity for the increased cooldown recovery, as well as mana efficiency to make it cheaper, 3 points in Momentum so that you get haste afterwards, 1 point in Lasting Presence to create a shadow after you're done shifting, and then 1 point in Dancing Shadows so that all shadows use Shadow Cascade every time that you shift. 4 points in Swift Recovery so that you gain mana back on use. That only costs 13 mana to use, and you're getting 16 mana back, so it's technically a mana generator for you, so you want to shift as much as possible. 1 point in Shadow Slip, so you're invulnerable while shifting, and then 1 point in Elusive, so you have extra dodge rating per point of dex after you have shifted. For Shadow Cascade, we have this set up to throw out a bunch of daggers, which all have a chance to apply Shadow Dagger, and then we get lots of mana back with it. So we've got 2 points in Shadow Torrent and 2 points in Shadow Flourish. The extra physical damage is nice when you do have that, so when you get some hits with Shadow Cascade, you'll get that extra physical damage, which will boost the Shadow Dagger damage. 2 points in Dismantle, 1 point in Onslaught, so when you use Shadow Cascade, a portion of its mana is refunded to you, which really helps with mana. 2 points in Fight in the Shadows, so that you gain mana for every shadow that's active when you use it, so when you use like Synchronized Strike and then you use Shift, which then uses Shadow Cascade, if you have 4 to 5 shadows active, you get 24 to 30 mana back, which is a really nice refund. And 2 points in Gloomstalker, so that you create a shadow on kill, or at least you have a chance to. 1 point in Crushing Darkness, 4 points in Dagger Dance, so that now every Shadow Cascade that you have is going to throw out 4 daggers. 1 point in Porcupine's Wrath, so that it is now 7 daggers being thrown out instead, so you can hit up to at least 7 different enemies. They don't shotgun, so they can't all hit the same target. And 1 point in Shadow Elegance, so that those 7 daggers that are shot out cast from you have a 100% chance for Shadow Dagger. The ones from Shadows have a 20% chance to apply the Shadow Dagger, but you're going to apply a bunch of stacks of Shadow Daggers on enemies with this. And then 2 points in Dagger Flow, so those daggers go further. For Synchronized Strike, we're basically using this to apply Shadow Dagger on hit with it, but also to generate a bunch of shadows. So we've got 1 point in Growing Darkness, 2 points in Force Shadowing, and then 1 point in Dark Alley. So instead of creating 2 shadows, we'll create 4 shadows when we use it. 3 points in Dynamics to reduce that mana cost, 2 points in Art of the Blade to unlock the perfect coordination, which we put 1 point there so all your shadows can jump inward at an enemy. If you have mana issues, don't worry about this point for now. 5 points in Coordinated Cuts, so that you have armor shred chance and effect on hits with Synchronized Strike. 4 points in Harmony of Death, so that your Synchronized Strike hits will inflict critical vulnerability, making it easier to crit enemies. We don't care too much about crit in this unless you've given enemies 100% critical strike avoidance, then you want to reduce that, which vulnerability will. But the Plunge effect from Shadow Daggers already has a guaranteed crit. However, if they do have 100% crit avoidance, it doesn't override that. So you will need it if for some reason you choose the modifiers in the monolith to give them 100% crit avoidance, which is kind of hard to do. And then 1 point in Umbral Assassination, so that you apply Shadow Daggers on hit with the Synchronized Strike as well. So all of our skills are applying it for us. Then for Smokebomb, we're using Smokebomb to get Dust Shroud, Crimson Shroud, and then to also make a shadow every second, which is really nice. If we're having mana issues with Synchronized Strike, you can just let your Smokebomb generate shadows for a bit, which when you use Shadow Cascade will then give you mana back. So it's a good mana generator for us. We got 1 point in Shrouded in Darkness for that dodge rating, glancing blow chance, all from the Dust Shroud. 4 points in Rapid Concealment, so that we can have 2 Dust Shrouds per second instead of 1. 5 points in Lingering Fume, so it lasts as long as possible. 1 point in Concealed in Carnage, so that we can start getting those Crimson Shroud buffs, which will let us take less damage over time. 2 points in Smoke Blades, 3 points in Blood Bandit, so we get melee Leech Wildwind Smokebomb, which is really nice for single target. The Shadow Dagger is a melee attack, so we can leech a big portion of that damage. And then 4 points in Umbral Assault, so that every second there's a 100% chance to create a shadow. For passives, we've got 43 points in the base request, which is a lot of points for the base, but there were some good spots to put it. We've got 8 points in Swift Assassin for that flat 8 damage, which is really nice. We don't worry too much about the attack speed. 8 points in Steady Hand for that dex, which gives us flat dodge, as well as increased damage with Umbral Blades, as well as some health. 8 points in Guile for that dodge rating and poison resist. 5 points in Evasion, so we take less damage while moving, and it also gives us increased dodge rating. 5 points in Agility, so we can get haste on hit, and we also get increased damage based on our move speed. We can pretty much always have haste going because of this. 1 point in Twin Blade, so we can dual wield, and then 8 points in Duelist for increased damage while dual wielding, as well as increased dodge rating while dual wielding, which we are doing in this build. Nothing in the Marksman, and then 69 points in the Bladedancer, our master class, with 8 of them in Cloak of Shadows, 5 in Pursuit, we want that move speed, 8 points in Once because we get a ton of flat damage and throwing damage here, 1 point in Shroud of Dusk, 3 points in 𝐕 for that Dust Shroud chance when we do hits. We also have that chance when we get hit. Then we've got 5 points in 𝐂𝐿𝐷𝐼𝐻 Pact for that flat dodge ring, as well as increased damage at full health. We do generate ward every time a shadow is made, so we're usually almost always at full health. 5 points in Perfection, so that for each stack of Perfection we get 10% increased damage. And then through Confidence with 5 points, we also get flat dodge and armor per stack of Perfection that we have as well, which you can have up to 10 stacks. So that's a lot of dodge, a lot of armor, and a lot of increased damage. And then 1 point in Exuberance, so that you can get 2 stacks of Perfection every time that you do a hit on an enemy. And then of course all those stacks disappear if you get hit. So we want as much dodge as possible to not get hit. We got 5 points in Blood Dance for that melee damage leeches health, 8 points in Flash of Steel for that increased damage while dual wielding, 1 point in Critical Eye, some more critical vulnerability chance here, and then 5 points in that all-in so that we have more critical strike multiplier. We don't care about the less damage by non-crits because the Shadow Dagger, which is guaranteed crit, is what's doing all of our damage. 8 points in Death's Door so that we take less damage when we're at low life, and then the last point in Shadow Master so we can have up to 5 shadows instead of 4. For the character sheet, you can see we have about 2400 life. We haven't quite capped all of our resistances, still working on some elemental. We're going to have to change gear a little bit, maybe change a base type, but for the most part we're mostly covered there. We could also reduce some of our damage. We have some penetration with Shadow Daggers on idols. We could put elemental resist there instead, but you kind of want to get those capped. We're not too worried about it. Again, if you do get hit hard, like if you don't dodge an attack, you're probably just going to die anyways, so it's kind of up to you if you want to cap them out. Going for as much dodge is the way to go. We got about 20% armor. Again, that goes up with Perfection stacks. Just staying here, we got 72% dodge. That also goes up with Perfection stacks, which is really nice. Haven't quite capped out the Endurance yet, and Critical Strike Avoidance. I'll finish that once I get the Blessing for Critical Strike Avoidance, and then I'll just get it on a piece of gear to cap it out. But that's the next thing that we'll end up doing with this. Again, we're at 500 plus Corruption, and we haven't had any issues. And then for damage types, we have about 300% increased physical damage. That will go up with Perfection stacks as well. And then we also have 376% critical strike multiplier. You can get over 400%, but we went dual dagger instead of a sword in the offhand, so we have a little bit less than what most people will run. Then for the inventory, we're going dual Smoke Weaver. If you get LP on a Smoke Weaver, getting flat melee physical damage is probably the best thing you can get. You can get increased physical damage or try and roll that as well, but the flat is going to be the biggest upside of this. You can get critical strike multiplier as well if you want. If you're running 3 stats, I would go for critical strike multiplier as well as the flat damage. And then for all your items, get throwing damage, physical damage, health, and whatever resist that you want. And then for the idols, you just want that physical penetration with Shadow Daggers. You can get this on the chest and the helm, as well as on your idols in a 1x3, so you can wear up to 4 of them. So you can get anywhere from 100 to 200%, which is kind of, for all intents and purposes, a more modifier, which is huge for the build. You're going to notice the damage really pop when you put a bunch of those on. And then for how to play the build, it's really simple. You're just going to shift around. When you shift, again, you're going to leave a shadow. The shadow will use Shadow Cascade, and when it does that, you can see all the daggers come flying out. So when we shift, the shift itself is a melee hit, which applies a Shadow Dagger. The Cascade, when it goes off and those daggers go off, those apply a Shadow Dagger stack as well. And then the Umbral Blade is going to be applying it on every hit that it does. So you can see the really big pop number that we're getting there is every time that we're getting the plunge, which is 4 stacks of Shadow Dagger. And that's with just 1. And you can see it hits pretty hard. Then we also have Smokebomb, and when Smokebomb goes off, it's going to make shadows so that when we shift, they all make Umbral Blades and shoot out daggers with Shadow Cascade. So it's really nice, so you get a bunch of them with that. That doesn't cost as much mana. The one that is going to cost a lot of mana is going to be Synchronized Strike, because when we use it, all the shadows are going to jump in there. It's got a big mana cost, but you get a lot of that mana back once you shift and use Shadow Cascade. But with that, you'll get a ton of shadows through it. And then when you shift, you get all those Umbral Blades. It's just a ton of them. And you can see our biggest hits there are doing about 500,000 damage, which is really, really nice for a single target. But that's pretty much it. You shift until you get to a boss. When you get to a boss, Sync Strike, throw on a Smoke Bomb, shift, and you get your nice single target damage. And that's going to be it for this build guide. I hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, leave a comment below if you enjoyed it, if you're looking for another build. I got plenty of time to do some more, but I'm going to leave you guys with some gameplay. As always, stay safe and have a good one.